Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hype Mind. Today we have a special guest with us again. Welcome back, Sophia. Here we are on take 2 of the show with you. It's good to have you back. And today we're going to be talking about judgment versus redemption. And well, the neat thing is, while those are kind of on the absolute opposite spectrums of of their meanings and of theology, they're actually very, very entwined, and that's for a number of reasons. But if you have a thought, why don't you start off with what's on your mind, Sophia?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what you said about them being connected, in many ways, I think is very true. I mean, I think that's often the case with a pair of opposites, right? They're not only kind of opposite each other, but they're complementary or necessary for each other. And I think that, I mean, it obviously very much depends on what you mean by judgment and redemption. But the word redemption tends to imply kind of some form of a healing or a restoration, right? And oftentimes, in order for that to take place, you need kind of a diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Just as if you're sick, you need the doctor to tell you that there's something wrong with you in order to make it right. And so I think oftentimes in, whatever form of a redemption that, is taking place, there needs to be an acknowledgement that something needs to be redeemed. And there needs to be almost, kind of often a sort of judgment that takes place in order for that redemption to be possible. Yeah,
totally. I mean, that was more or less what I'm thinking too, because when people work towards overcoming their addictions, for example, what's the first step everybody always says of overcoming their problems is knowing there is a problem. And so to seek the redemption portion of solving a problem, you have to first know there's a problem. So you have to first judge yourself and look at yourself and, or have someone else do it for you. Some form of judgment ends up taking place. So it's just interesting in that aspect because, again, a lot of times those words do seem like they're polar opposites, which brings up other points, because, to enable someone to redeem kind of feels like most people find encouragement in something like that when they're in an absolute judgment-free zone. You feel like you have hope when you are removed from any sort of criticism, but at the same time, one enables the other. You can't really get through, like what you're saying, you can't really get through the redemption portion unless you've been judged or unless you're willing to be judged. So they're actually very closely related, and it makes me think of the polarities that you see in anything in life. It's the exact opposites tend to also come together the strongest. The North and South Pole being the greatest magnetic force, to the point where they're inseparable depending on the magnetism. So
yeah
along that line.
Yeah, and I think that and that's the beauty of paradox too, right? You have two opposites that are kind of necessary for one another, in order for both to kind of fully exist and fully find a meaning. But also, I think it's important. Yeah, what you said about
create a circle. They're like yin and yang.
Kind of, yeah. There's this complementarity to them. And also what you said too about most people feeling kind of safe to kind of acknowledge that there is a problem or to move forward, or to be healed or to be redeemed or, what have you, kind of in a, quote unquote, judgment-free zone. I think that actually brings up a really important insight, which is that often for kind of judgment about something negative, right, whether it be a person's actions or where they are or something that needs to change, in order for that judgment to take place well and to be healthy and to be good, there has to be an identical judgment that's made simultaneously about the good of that person's just being and identity, right? Because unless you're able to affirm that this person is good and that they're worthy of being redeemed, right? That there is this underlying goodness simply because they exist and simply because they're a human being. If that is not also affirmed while also judging that maybe, where they are right now is not good, or what they're doing right now is really not good for them, right? Or is just objectively not good. In order to, to make that negative judgment, I think the reason that so many people, especially today, are so sensitive to that is because they conflate their identity with what they're doing, or they conflate their identity with their actions. And in that case, if you were judging a person's actions, can feel like an absolute rejection of them as a human, right?
So let me get something straight. Are you saying that you kind of have to see the value in a person by judging them in order to see them worth saving?
I'm saying that you have to acknowledge that there's a fundamental human dignity that exists, right? That
Right.
every single
Right. There's a good in everybody,
exactly,
a
and
value in
that,
everybody.
that goodness comes from their personhood, right? And because of that, every single human being is worth saving, is worth, our lives are worth living.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so within that framework, then you can kind of, that gives you the freedom to diagnose the problem, right? Because you're able to say, that addiction is bad, is hurting you, and is not good and is wrong, right? Without saying you are inherently bad, right? Or
or you see that goodness and you're like, hey, it is worth fixing myself because I am good. It is worth, it is worth helping them because they have a value, even if maybe they don't see it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
That's very true. And this idea was first presented to me by Jordan Peterson. And if you know him, you probably know he's pretty phenomenal. If you don't, you should check him out. If you don't think he's phenomenal, well, hey, then you're entitled to your own opinion. But the other big thing that corresponds with that, because he took a minute to look at it from a Christian point of view, which is phenomenal, because the complementariness of judgment and redemption, and some specific things about them, is redemption is found through the truth. And that's significant in so much as, well, let's talk about what he made very clear. He said in Christian religion you have Jesus, and Jesus says, I am the truth, right? But Jesus also came to earth to redeem people. And so so someone who is the truth, who comes to the earth to redeem people, well, it could be said that to be redeemed you need the truth. So the truth redeems. And so on top of the judgment being helpful in order to get to a redeeming place, you need to be truthful. You need to look at, you need an honest judgment for one, but just honest actions in general help you to get to a place of redemption, because whether it's you acting out an honest life, which enables you to see the dishonest side, the more good you see, the more you realize the darkness exists, and the same, well, it just that's one option, right? You can live it and see it, or you can just be realistic with yourself, and you can really be truthful with your own self, and that that enables you to come to a place of a conscious decision of, do I want to correct what I know is wrong because I'm being honest with myself, or do I not? And then usually most people, interestingly enough, feel that when they've done wrong, this was something someone was actually sharing with me earlier today. When they've done wrong, they feel they need to make it right, right? And there's the judgment. There's the, I am judging myself and feel like I need to make amends, which is what judgment is. Judgment is this, it's a correctional action, or gosh, word above me, but it's the realization that that something needs to be manipulated to make things right, and usually involved in that is the correction of something and the amendment of something else.
Yeah, usually there's this kind of reconciliation, right? Whether that be with another person, whether that be with yourself, whether that be with a situation, in some way trying to, and what you were saying earlier about the importance of the truth and living in the truth, right? I think that you can only, speak of judgment in reference to the truth, right? In order to make a statement about something, even just like the basic grammatical sense of a judgment, right?
Yeah.
To claim that, there's a chair over there, right? That's a judgment about
Right.
reality.
Yeah.
And so that's a judgment about the truth. And so when you make that kind of a claim or a statement, about yourself or about another person or about a situation, and it's a negative one, in order, there's this sense of there's a lack here and there ought not to be.
Right.
And I want to make up for that lack. And
Yeah, I want to fill that void, which is
Yeah.
the amendment portion of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so here's the thing is the takeaway would be, and before we even talk about that, judgment, right? Because this can be a scary thing to be real with yourself about. Truth is cool. Everybody wants to know the truth realistically. Everybody likes it when people are honest with them. Redemption's cool because, hey, who doesn't want to be redeemed? Even if you believe in it, you probably want to be part of it realistically. But judgment's the scary part of it. That's the hard part. That's the hard part to overcome. That's the identifying my problems, seeing my shortcomings, acknowledging the wrong in my actions. That's the hard part. But the truth is, and funny enough, I learned that this was made clearer by that book, that philosophy book you shared. The cool thing about judgment is most men, speaking broad terms, men and women, they want it. They want to be punished for their wrongdoings. It's just an inherent part of humanity is to make amends. And those who seek to not have their wrongs made right are usually only heading in a much darker direction. Because those, so judgment, that's the hard part, right? But it's also not even that bad, because the reality is, with it comes the opportunity to make amends, to grow, and with those, with the amends of your wrongdoing comes a peace and a happiness in that. I think most people can say that they know that for sure. When you break the vase in your mother's living room because you were swinging the baseball bat, and you apologize and you go and buy her a new one. Well, you were afraid for her to find out in the beginning because you knew you were going to be judged. You shouldn't have been playing baseball, etc., whatever. But once you correct it, there's a huge peace. Even though you made a mistake, you know that the act of correcting it was right. And you find peace in that, and you take peace in that. It's unavoidable in most cases. There's some circumstances where, well, maybe your mother is a bit of a narcissist, so that fixing the vase didn't solve the problem, but it might have if she never found out you broke the vase to begin with. But
this sounds
the point
like a
is,
personal anecdote.
Yeah, it does get a little personal, not for me. But the thing is, even the hardest part of this, the judgment part, brings immense peace when you do correct it, which is a very necessary piece of motivation to understand. Because if there wasn't that peace of mind following the judgment portion, then you wouldn't want to engage in that judgment.
And I think all of this too, it calls to mind, kind of the necessity of hope. Because in a certain sense, any wrong we make, we can't, in a certain sense, we can't fully go back and completely undo it, right? You do have to either glue back together what is now a broken vase or buy an altogether new vase, right? You can't just magically make the vase new again. And there are some situations too where, you'll find yourself in a situation and you can only do so much, right, to reconcile it. But I think, even in those sorts of situations, you can still do what you can, surrender the rest and take what you've learned. I mean, sometimes that really has to be kind of the point at which you stop, right? Because there really can be, but this capacity to confront, with honesty where you are in a particular situation or what's going on, and to attempt to reconcile things and to make things right insofar as you're able, and then take what you can and continue moving forward. I mean, I think that takes a lot of hope, but I think that there's a lot of freedom in that. And it also takes some acceptance that you're going to make bad decisions sometimes, right? And that,
That's another very important fact.
Yeah.
I'll build off that last part in a second. But first, you mentioned gluing together the vase, and there's a really cool tradition in Asian culture. I think it's Japan, right, where they break a vase by mistake, and when they fix it with gold, so that all the cracks stand out, and it's all pure gold. And so the vase went from being worth, $10 to, $1 million, even though it was broken, even though a mistake occurred. Because of the mistake occurring and the appropriate correction being taken, something that was simply average became greater than average, right? And that's kind of the hopeful aspect is, when you correct mistakes, that's for people who are believers in God. That's the divine aspect. It's and for people in general, no matter what your beliefs are, your ability to face judgment and to correct something is to pursue a greater good, right? It's to amend a wrong, no matter, despite the difficulty of it, right? Because anybody could go from, not breaking their mother's vase to not breaking their mother's vase. There's no effort in that, The hard part is breaking your mother's vase and fixing your mother's vase. So to take on that responsibility, and that despite the consequences, despite the extra efforts on your part, is phenomenal. And then the last part you said was everybody makes mistakes. That's what it really clicked into me. Is the fact of the matter is we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes. So be real with yourself. The world doesn't end when you make one mistake. It's when you repeatedly fail to judge yourself and correct your actions that the world dies from your mistakes. So if anything, make your mistake and learn from it, because you're going to make a mistake. But it's the continual failure to correct that mistake that actually results in the damnation of humans. But it's that correction when a mistake occurs, because they're inevitable, that transforms you and the world into an even greater place than it was already in. So the inevitable is going to happen. It really comes down to your choice of choosing higher or lower. And the consequences.
And if I could just say one thing more, just very, very quickly, to throw in a completely side thing. I forget who it was, but someone said that humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, and that it presumes kind of a complete honesty with yourself about who you are and where you are. And I think that, all of this talk about kind of being able to judge yourself rightly and to not be afraid to acknowledge when something has gone wrong. That's really scary for a lot of people. And a lot of us, I think, are just kind of living our lives trying to control every aspect so that nothing ever goes wrong. And I think that there's a lot of freedom in acknowledging that, no, you're going to make mistakes, and that when you make a mistake, the world isn't ending, and that your value as a human person, is independent of all of these actions that you're making at points in time. And so being able to affirm yourself as fundamentally good as a human person, who is also, flawed and going to bumble around and do things. I think that those two things.
We're going to swing that baseball bat.
Holding those two things together makes it possible for judgment and for ultimately redemption to take place. So
that's true. I like that. Humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. That's true. That don't you make, again, mistakes are common, they're unavoidable. Don't beat yourself down. Simply think of the impact it has on others and correct it. Because hopefully the last thing you want to do is hurt other people. But with that, did you have any final thoughts? No? Wonderful. So that's about all. And again, you're going to make mistakes. You know, it happens. But the thing you want to think about is redeeming yourself from those mistakes for your good and for others' good, and enabling and permitting yourself to judge yourself and let others judge you in an appropriate way, so that you can seek to become a better person in the future.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.